David is by now a very young man of the world, in what was, in the early to mid-19th century, the greatest city in the world, London. It doesn't yet belong to him, far from it, but there are already hints that he aspires to fame and fortune, like Balzac's Rastignac, who looks down on Paris and declares, "À nous deux maintenant." It's between you and me now. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. How did you fare with last week's question? How, specifically, might Miss Shepherd have found her way into the chanting of the choristers? Well, as a clever and infatuated schoolboy, I can well imagine that David heard with his inner ear, and possibly even sang under his breath, Dickens couldn't write this in his novel. It would have been considered sacrilegious. But reading between the lines, that is David's fantasised idyll. And what's the source text for this perennially popular 17th century hymn? None other than Psalm 23, the most famous of the Psalms of David. On November the 13th, the married couple, Frederick and Marie Manning, were hanged on the roof of Horsemonger Lane Jail after being convicted of a gruesome murder dubbed the Bermondsey Horror. The public execution was witnessed by a crowd estimated at between 30 and 50,000, which included both Herman Melville and Charles Dickens. However awful the Mannings' crime, Dickens felt that the foul language and rowdy behaviour of the crowd was almost equally reprehensible, and he wrote 2 long letters to the Times calling for an end to public executions. Dickens was getting on so well with Copperfield that he was able to report to John Forster on the 20th that he'd written Part 9 after 2 days' very hard work indeed, and I think a smashing number. See if you agree. He was able to leave London on the 27th for Rockingham Castle in Northamptonshire, staying with his friends the Watsons, to whom he dedicated David Copperfield, and engaging in some impromptu amateur dramatics. We're going to consider 2 strange flowers this week, a rose and a daisy, who meet for the first time in this part. When Steerforth calls David Daisy, the inquisitive and enigmatic Rosa Dartle is compelled to ask, "But really, Mr. Copperfield, is it a nickname? And why does he give it you? Is it because he thinks you young and innocent? I am so stupid in these things." That is indeed Steerforth's conscious justification, but it also has the effect of feminising David, as Daisy is a girl's name. There may be a hidden motivation though, as Daisy is an English translation of the Latin element vid in David. And, fascinatingly, what might be thought of as the folk etymology of daisy is in fact the true origin of the flower name, as it used to be called a day's eye, from its habit of opening up in sunlight and closing at night, hence the observation, as in the novel's full title, of David Copperfield. Turning to Rosa Dartle, her surname is highly suggestive of her quick, sharp, darting nature. The verb to dartle entered the English language around 1855 with the meaning to dart or shoot forth repeatedly. But no source that I've consulted recognises that this vocabulary word was coined from the character name in Dickens, which it undoubtedly was. Like Scrooge as a synonym for a flint-hearted miser and killjoy, or Gamp as an old word for an umbrella, a metonym from Mrs. Gamp in Martin Chuzzlewit, who always carried a large umbrella. Throughout the run of Copperfield in Parts, the inside rear cover is occupied by an ad for the tailoring firm of E. Moses and Son. They attain some notoriety for the truly wretched verse, presumably penned by either E. Moses or his son, with which they sought to enliven their ads. In part 7, we're treated to the whale in the Thames. I'll spare you the excruciating puns and focus rather on the subject, which was in the news at the time. In October 1849, a beluga whale had the misfortune to stray into the Thames estuary and was beached at Grays in Essex, as recorded in this contemporary engraving. This was a rare sighting of an Arctic whale in the Thames estuary, only occurring subsequently in 1913 and 2018 with Benny the beluga. This lively image shows David on the box seat of the London stagecoach, a position he will shortly be forced to relinquish to the gentleman leaning over his shoulder. In response to the coachman's inquiry about his dealings with a certain breed of horse, he gruffly answers back, "Ain't I what?" asked the gentleman behind. "Bred them Suffolk punches by wholesale." "I should think so," said the gentleman. "There ain't no sort of horse that I ain't bred, and no sort of dog. Horses and dogs is some men's fancy. They're wittles and drink to me. Lodging, wife and children, reading, writing and arithmetic, snuff, tobacco and sleep." "That ain't a sort of man to see sitting behind a coach box, is it though?" said William in my ear as he handled the reins. I construed this remark into an indication of a wish that he should have my place, so I blushingly offered to resign it. The arrival of David and Steerforth at Dan Peggotty's boathouse reveals to us that little Emily, the title of the chapter, is little no more, but a very attractive young woman. I have a fascination with colour terms in Dickens's writing, partly because he uses them so sparingly. So, in chapter 21, the word blue occurs just twice. What does it refer to? See you again soon.